let's start with Julia, and why don't you tell us about how you got started, what was interesting for you about business, and you were in Surabaya.
Surabaya, yeah.
And then you came to the West Coast and got stuck.
So I was born and raised in Surabaya, Indonesia. I never had a role model in terms of a woman in my family that has a career. I'm actually the first in the family that has a career, that went to college and then had a career. But I was very fortunate because when I was growing up, my dad always encouraged me to become financially independent. Because what he said is that I cannot take care of you forever, and you need to make sure that you are becoming financially independent so that you don't have to depend on a man or a husband, to make sure that you are well taken care of. As soon as I graduated from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, I moved to Los Angeles, and I've been living in Los Angeles ever since. And, when I had a college degree and then looking for a job, all I wanted at the time was just to get a job. But, I was really fortunate enough in looking back to my career that, along the way, I had the opportunity to, finally, at the bank, East West Bank. I retired last year as a president and COO. I was there for 27 years, and I saw the bank grew from a California small bank, $400 million in assets in 1989 when I joined them, to become one of the top 30 largest publicly traded banks in the country with over $33 billion in assets.
When you were at the bank, you had role models. Clearly, as you were growing up, you had role models in Surabaya. And then you came into the United States, and you had men and women role models in the United States that were encouraging you. Could you talk a little bit about the difference from a cultural perspective?
I had a mentor, a man, American, a Caucasian man, that he took an interest in helping me with my career. And it was interesting. This is in 1981. His name is Paul Archer. And he told me that, Julia, with your talents, if you had been a male, Caucasian male, you would go very far in corporate America. That was in 1981. And he meant it, well. Probably now, it doesn't sound like, a politically correct statement to make. But, he's a good friend, and he supported me. So, he really meant well. But, at the time, he said that it is very difficult, for you, to move up, in corporate ladder. Not just as a woman, and then you are an Asian and you are an immigrant. So I call myself a triple minority. So I'm Asian woman and, an immigrant. And maybe the fourth that, I'm kind of self-conscious. I'm short, I wish I was a lot taller, then, I wouldn't say that I'm shorter. But, however, along the way, I think that I'm fortunate enough to have mentors that help me. But more importantly, as I mentioned, is that I think that over time, the most important is to feel confident, to take on opportunity, to take on assignments.
To go grab them.
Yeah, and grab them. Because you cannot just wait for people to give it to you. I think it has to be both ways.
So, Julie, you started in banking after you beat up your four brothers and put them in their place.
One of the things that people say to me all the time, young women will say to me, it's very intimidating being in the financial services industry where you may be the only woman in the room a lot. And I've spent most of my career being one of the few women in the room. But I've always said to people, I've never noticed. And I never noticed probably because I grew up with four brothers, and I was used to being in a very male-dominated environment. So maybe going into banking was actually just like being at home. So I always felt very comfortable there, and it never really, I never really thought about it one way or the other. In terms of banking, how I got into banking, I went to college right down the street at George Washington University, and I was an international affairs major studying East-West relations during the Cold War and international economics. And that degree was supposed to prepare me to go work at the State Department. So that's where you got the State Department. And that's what I always thought I would do, is take the Foreign Service exam and go work at the State Department. But all I knew that I wanted, and I think earlier one of the students said, when you're at this age where you're confused about what do you want to do with your life and your career, I only knew one thing, and I knew it from the time I was in 9th grade, which was I was absolutely fascinated to learn everything I could about every country in the world and understand the problems they were facing and how it all interconnected. And so I got a job in banking right out of college, and I thought that I would do it for a few years and maybe go back to law school and do international law, and I never left because it allowed me to do all the things that I love doing. So my advice to young people is figure out what is that thing that you're passionate about, and figure out how to gear your career towards being able to combine that passion.
You're very involved in women's mentoring and women's sponsorship. I think you had something to do with the program in Jakarta. Was there something that propelled you to start doing that?
At Citi, it's been easy because I travel all over the globe to all of our offices, and we are in 100 countries, and we have women's councils in every country. So when I was in Indonesia, I met with the Women's Council. The group that you saw here on the film was Junior Achievement, which is a global organization that Citi is a big sponsor of. And I'm on the board. I'm the chairwoman for JA USA, and that group, it just happened to be a bunch of women that won that event. That's not a women's initiative. It's a entrepreneurship training is what Junior Achievement does for all students. And what was great about that competition was that it's the company program for students, high school students, to create their own company and compete in a competition. And that team of girls won across all the high school teams in Indonesia, and then went on to Japan and came in number 2 for the whole Asia region. So that's why we were, and Citi was the sponsor of that particular team, so we were very proud of that.
I'd like to take this time now to open up the floor for questions, especially for all the younger women here who now have it's just a piece of cake. You just walk in, get a job, and be CEO.
Hello, my name is Desi Pramita, and I'm a master's student at Georgetown University. So I was so inspired by both of you. And my question is how can we find those confidence?
I really think that women are just so harsh on themselves because they always feel that, maybe I'm not as good as, the man or the others, and that's how I was just chosen because I'm a woman. I try not to think about all the negatives.
Yeah.
I feel that whatever I was asked or I was appointed or I was given is because of my values and my, because I deserve it. I really don't worry about, do people think that, just because you're a woman or an Asian woman, that's how you got the job. I said that, hey, whatever that job is, I wanted to prove that, I deserve the job, I got the job, and I'm going to do, well on it.
I would have to reiterate what you're saying is that I tell young analysts have asked me on the first day of work, what is it, if you're the only woman going into the room again, how do you behave? And I always say, just forget you're a woman walking into the room. You're a banker. You're a banker walking into the room. And you're a banker walking into the room, and focus on what you have in common. Don't focus on the differences. The difference may be you're the only Asian in the room, you're the only woman in the room, you're the only this in the room. The commonality when you go into a room with your colleagues in banking is, are you focused on solving a problem for the client that is going to be beneficial to the client and beneficial to the firm? And are you doing that to the best of your ability with a focus on excellence? And if you bring that to the table, that's what you should be bringing to the table. And that passion for what you're doing. And through passion, I think people work harder and they learn more if they're passionate about what they're doing and they really are excited about what they're doing. And then that develops confidence because you develop a competency. And so then you wind up coming to the table with that confidence and competency about being a good banker that has something to add to the conversation.